Thanks so much for the introduction. It's an honor for me to speak to all of you today. As said, my talk is entitled "Unpleasant Truths about Automotive Security." I brought you 5 of these unpleasant truths. There are many more, but let's say time is as it is, and so I picked the 5 that are most relevant from my point of view for this audience. So basically what happens in the next 20 to 30 minutes is we broaden a little bit the view of what was said until now. It was more about testing and how to do it and what the problems are about this. And I will, let's say, open up the discussion in the sense of starting more on the whole over automotive industry. Before I go this, I have a little advertising on the on our company. So what are we doing if you're not aware of the portfolio of ESCRYPT? So basically we design security, we enable security, and we manage security, meaning on the design part is mainly consulting. As you see here, there's consulting about the strategy, we consult about trainings, we have expert consulting and different fields of security for your automotive domain, as well as security testing, which you're interested most is the last point on the left side. So here we do all kinds of testing in let's say the specific automotive domains, so functional testing, wool scans, pen testing, of course also fuzzing. We do automated testing, but also manual testing. There is, let's say, from black, gray to white box testing, but also on the functionality of the car. This can be only one function that we test, one piece of software. We test a whole ECU, electronic unit in the car, but also we do testing for the whole car. So if you want to have a security test for your whole car, you can just call me later, and then we can arrange this. We have products, you see them in the middle. There are some products that are in the car, and some products are, let's say, for the communication with the car, but also securing the production side, as well as having services on the back end that helps to create credentials to monitor your car when it's on the road and so forth. And this comes to our managed service. So we have managed PKIs, but we also have security operations center, or we have threat intelligence and forensics, all these kind of things to help to secure, let's say, the all over system, the all over ecosystem in the car domain. Some figures and numbers, if you're interested in, we are by now 400 experts in security. We have about 240 engineers working on our own software products. They are located in 7 R&D locations, and worldwide we are present at 19 locations. As said, we are part of the Bosch Group since 2012. We were founded in 2004 as a spin-off of the Ruhr-Universität in Bochum. Okay, let's get to the point. The one introduction slide I brought with me. You see here, how did automotive industry change? On the left side, you see in the beginning, we only secured, when I started, let's say, automotive security, we secured only one single ECU. Maybe it was the immobilizer, for example. The complexity of the system increases, the connectivity increases, and therefore also the attack potential, the vulnerabilities increases, and therefore, and this is why all we are here today, is also the relevant security risk, and therefore we need increasing security skills also in the automotive domain. And so I was really happy to see all these excellent ideas also on this morning sessions. Okay, let's come to the unpleasant truths that we have to face in the automotive industry. So the first one, I see that there's a study from I can give you also the sources of all these numbers I have on the slides. there's a study that in 2023 we will have 775 million cars connected worldwide. And this is through telematics and in-vehicle apps. Of course, what does arise with this is the unpleasant truth. I call this the Titanic syndrome. What is the Titanic syndrome? Is basically for those who put themselves in danger first in it. So car manufacturers without security strategy will not survive. The challenge here is you have the security is basically the enabler for the connected mobility. So you need to have the security in order to start all this new fancy stuff that we have in the car today, and we will have much more in the future to come. On the other hand, you see security is always a penalty service, meaning that the driver in your car will not see it. And for your boss, it will always be, let's say, a cost driving factor. It's something that you don't earn any more money, but on the other hand, you need to have it set up, and this only costs you money and is not an extra, let's say, business model for you that you can earn more money. And of course, the survival is if you don't take it serious, then there will be more earlier or later we will have a problem. And if you don't see it, you will end up like the Titanic, and we all know how this went. So with all the slides of the unpleasant truths, I give you also some hints what can be activities, actions, strategic actions that you have to do. And you see here now also the color of the slides went from black to white. So in parentheses, it's good to have a good marketing department and helps you design slides, as you see here. So white is always the strategic action you can do, or we as a whole community in the automotive world, we should do. So security as a strategic task. So make sure that in your company, security is key. And as mentioned before, this needs to be covered by the management. Management needs to be behind this. Of course, you need security awareness, and this goes from, let's say, the top management to everybody in the company. Everybody should be aware that security is important and that we need to take care of it in all what we do in the company. And last but not least, this is not something that is security is not only, let's say, for the testing part of the V-cycle or for the production part or for the aftermarket. This all needs to be orchestrated. There are different implications. You have safety with you, you have processes, you have organization, you have legal stuff. All this is very complex, and companies are good. A good advice is to orchestrate this all over the whole life cycle in every stage and with all the key players in the company. Coming to the next unpleasant truth, we have seen quite a bit of extensive number growing of attacks in the car. So you see here from 2016 to 19, it's times 7. Let's say combining this is of course, if you look at the numbers, it's not really high, but combining this with the 775 million cars connected, this can really affect our whole social life in the future if we are not taking care of this. I call this one no safety without security. Basically, it's about risk of lives. It's about the life of the drivers of the car. And there's a famous quote. It was actually done by the CEO, Mr. Spess of Jaguar Land Rover. And he said, in a connected world, cybersecurity is as important for safety as the brakes. So security is as important as the brakes for safety. And I think we should all be aware of this and do our actions accordingly. So basically, the problems or the challenges that we have is we have to connect safety critical systems. So it's really about the safety in the car, and security is basically helping to push safety to a higher level. So it's really a very important point in your car. As I said, the potential of accidents or of problems are really high if you see the number of incidents that grow over the last years, and also the size of the fleet that will be connected in the future. So even if you only have a little number of attacks that were successful, there is a study where they say in an scenario in a big city in a rush hour in the US, if all these cars are connected and somebody is really able to hack this, they speak about 3,000 deaths in one morning if there is really a significant attack. Of course, what can we do? There is some actions that we can do. It's always important to look at, let's say, original equipment. What I mean here is, of course, buy the things that you trust and buy things of companies that are really trustworthy and where they hopefully have a good, let's say, process and people in place that have also the security in their mind. Secondly is you also have to consider the whole life cycle. And we as company are in many projects, and we always talk with our customers, and it's really important to point this out all over again and again and again. So it's really about starting with a white paper of your new function, consider security, until the development, the testing, the production, aftermarket, until your car is dead. You have to consider security. That's really important, because if you don't do this, you will not have a sound security at all, because let's say the weakest chain will always break. And the weakest kind of part of the chain will break the whole chain. And it's also not about, let's say, embedded. It's not only about the car. You also have to put more, let's say, classical IT security competence in your team and in your company. It's about the IDS, it's about the security operation centers and so forth. So that's why I also built it up in the company, this kind of expertise over the last years, because in the beginning we only were looking at embedded, but that's not enough anymore. You need all this expertise here. This brings me to my third number of unpleasant truths, the lines of code. There is a prediction that we will have in the future 300 to 500 million, depending on what kind of sources you look at, lines of code in your car. If you look at the Golf 8 that's just coming out, we have 100 million lines of code in Golf 8. I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you compare this, for example, to Boeing 787, there are only 14 million lines of code. So it's only 14% in the Boeing than in your Golf that you buy. So if you consider now that we say, let's say, between 100 and 200,000 lines of code, not millions, thousand lines of code, you get a problem. That means in the future, if you have like 300 to 500 million lines of code in your car, you also buy a car with, let's say, 2,000 to 3,000 errors in code. That might not all be security problems, but let's say errors on smaller and bigger size. But that's a huge number. I don't want to drive around with a car with, let's say, 2,000 errors in code. What is the challenge here? I say here it's a reasonable, let's say, consideration of risk. So basically, as we all know, we are all experts in security here. 100% security is, first of all, not possible, and you cannot afford this. Nobody will pay you to do, let's say, an unlimited fast testing for the next 10 years of one piece of software. So we really need to, let's say, balance the risk and the investment. So security is an investment, and on the other side, if you don't do it right, you have a risk. So it's a balance. You really need to make sure that you get the right balance here. Of the one side, you will lose business if you have too many risks, and you also will lose business if you spend too much money, because then your car or whatever you design is too expensive. And as said before, let's say it's not only about embedded, but you also need to consider things like the cloud, the infrastructure. That is also important to be considered in today's connected world. Again, let's say what are the points you can do. Of course, you can just segment your car. So you kind of say, okay, this is the safety critical part, and it's like separated, and you need to be certain considerations on security on this part. On the other hand, the connectivity is also maybe something that you have to consider, because there all the things will come in and out of the car. This is then about prioritization, meaning you really need to prioritize your security activities on the important fields, and this is for each product is different, and maybe for each architecture in the car is different. So you really have to have experts looking into this, where you really need to consider your security. Last but not least, what you can do here is the resilience in security, meaning the resilience on your systems, on your technical systems, but also on your organization and on your processes. And the dimensions you should look at is, of course, threat protection, adaptability, durability, and recoverability. So all these things are part of your resilience management, which is important to go. Come to my fourth unpleasant truths. If you look in today's world and you read the statistic of our BSI, we have about 117 million new malware per day, and from June last year to May this year, they say there were 322 new malware programs per day. So it's really a big number. Of course, this is all only considering, let's say, our normal IT. But if you look into the future, where all this Internet of Things are connected, this will also hit us in different other domains. What is the challenge here? I say here an omnipresent threat. So if you don't find the hole, somebody else will do. And let's say the evil is everywhere, and it's there. So the challenges here is, of course, we have very, very complex systems, and as discussed here already, it's also a challenge to test this. How can you fast test your systems if they are run more and more complex functions and features, and then there are more subsystems connected, maybe also with different suppliers and so forth. So this is really a challenge for our testing community, and there were some very interesting, let's say, challenges already put out this morning, for example. And you have to also make sure that you consider the lifetime. It's not like your mobile phone that you change every year and get a new one. Here we have a car, and the lifespan of this car is very, very long. So just make sure when you do your design, when you do your testing and so forth, make sure that this needs to be covered the whole life cycle. And of course, production is key. As said before, we in the last years, we consider quite a bit on securing the production, because everybody was only looking at their immobilizer in the car, but then let's say we got some problems into the car on the production side. So there are very simple things like, how do you get your credentials from your back end into your production line to end of line? This is not trivial if you want to do this securely. What can you do? And I think here we have the experts on the line. Of course, security strategy, testing strategy. So really testing, and let's say the FASCOM itself as a platform to exchange these ideas is excellent. So I think testing from the beginning of your start of, let's say, requirement analysis, starting with your blank piece of paper, make sure security testing and security in itself, as security as function or enabler for function, as well as security testing, is part of your considerations. And of course, this needs to be done for all connected entities. So it's different ECUs in the car. It's different cars that are connected to each other. Maybe you're connected to your traffic light, but you're for sure connected to some kind of backend. And all this needs to be considered in your security and also in your security testing. So it's not only about security testing of your ECU in the car, but it's also about security testing of your backend. And as said, this needs to be done over the whole life cycle. Coming to my last unpleasant truth that I wanted to present today, and this is the regulations. We heard this at one point today. There is new regulations coming up. We didn't had a lot of regulations and standardization in the automotive security world over the last years, but now they are coming, and unfortunately they differ a little bit depending on what kind of standardization you're looking into. They differ a little bit on the different areas of the world, but anyways, we are looking into this, and UNECE and ISO is the prominent coming up. What is the, let's say, unpleasant truth behind all this is those who don't follow the rules are disqualified. So it's really, you have to follow these rules. You have to become, let's say, a player with this, following this standardization in order to be part of the market and be able to participate in the market. The challenge that will rise immediately here is, of course, the increasing complexity. You don't have only, let's say, your technical security complexity with your car and the back end and so forth, but now you have also to fulfill certain standardizations, which increases again your complexity in your company or in your process. Of course, with the complexity is always a fear also of over-regulation. If we have an over-regulation, at one point, you're not able to do your job anymore because you're only considering regulations. And of course, there's a high pressure to react. That can be a challenge, but can be also a chance here to convince, for example, upper management. What should you do to work against these unpleasant truths? Of course, get legal experts into your teams. They can help you to cope with the upcoming regulations and to fulfill them. Of course, the standard compliant security design is very important, but some of the, it's not only design of your technical system, it's also design of your processes. For example, the ISO 21434 is more about processes and how you fulfill your processes. What do you need to do? And implement a cyber management system, cybersecurity management system. This is something that is that needs to be done. For example, if you look at the UNECE 29. So these are things that are new and that needs to be considered in your way forward. So basically, if you look at these 5 unpleasant truths that I just mentioned to you, so there was this Titanic syndrome, no safety without security, there is a risk, omnipresent threat, and the regulations that are out there. So all of this is something that are, let's say, we need to consider in the whole domain, let's say, of automotive security. And I'm a strong believer that there needs to be a collaboration between different parties to be actually able to cope with this as a, let's say, automotive society, automotive security domain. What is sure is we will get more mobility. We will get more connected mobility over the next years to come, and we have to, let's say, deal with these unpleasant facts in the cybersecurity area in the automotive domain. And this is not something only for, let's say, the automotive manufacturer. It's all of us, let's say, from the tier 1, 2, and 3 as well as the security community that needs to help here. And we need to understand, let's say, what is the need for, let's say, we are able to participate in the market. We need to understand how we combine, for example, things like machine learning and human actions and security. We need to understand how we do the business, like what kind of subject to a business analysis do we need to consider here. And of course, this partnering. I think it's not possible to do this alone. We have to partner, for example, with people with high security knowledge. We have to partner with people from different domains and so forth. And I think it's important also, as I said, consider the whole life cycle. And in this also, let's say, society will play a role, as well as legal obligations that we will have. So each of this is important for all of us. And I will end my talk with a quote from Bruce Schneier. He said, "Security is not a product, but a process." So I just want to put this up in order to tell you there's a lot of people on the line right now that are interested in fuzzing, in testing, in different kinds for the system and functions. But please don't forget that it's not everything. Security cannot be designed or cannot be done if we only are concentrating on testing. You also have to make sure that everything else around the testing is also done well, which is, for example, management of processes, which is including management for your security strategy, and so forth and so forth. So it's a little provocative, this statement from Bruce Schneier, but I think this maybe will flourish our discussion later on. So thanks so much for having me, and I hope I gave you a little bit insight in what I think is are facts that we all should know about automotive, and where this will are developing to. And so I'm happy to receive your question, and thanks for having me.
Thomas, thank you so much. That was a fascinating talk and a nice overview of all the problems the automotive industry is facing. And particularly the last point, the legal one, seems to be creating a lot of interest. So I have a question from Paul here.
Sure.
Do any of the existing or emerging standards provide guidance on how to meet security objectives around testing, particularly where fuzz testing can be used?
Yeah, of course, this is always, let's say, I will step back one step. Let's say I'm happy that we have regulations at all. So I was preaching this for 15 years now, that, let's say, all other domains have some kind of specific security standards, regulations, at least de facto standards, and so forth. If you look in the banking industry, smart card industry, whatever you name it, there's a certain regulations already there. But in the automotive industry, I was preaching this for many years, also with different agencies and governments. And I'm very happy that we go into this direction now, because this will help all of us to make, let's say, this ecosystem more secure. Now, the question is always, if you do this standardization, how much is is it more a general standardization on, for example, processes, how to do things, or do we really go into the depths like testing? And so far, there's no regulation, at least I'm not aware of one. If you have one, please let me know, but I'm not aware of any of these regulations where you really have concrete things about testing, and, for example, that fuzz testing is necessary to get some kind of approval or certificate.
I think there's a new ISO standard where that was actually mentioned specifically, but it's quite new. I think Sergey mentioned that. We maybe talk about that in the panel later on a bit more.
If you talk about the ISO 21434, there is mentioned that testing should be part of, let's say, your process, but they don't say test your function 100, let's say 1 hour with fuzz testing. So it's not that concrete, yeah. But they say, of course, that security in the process, security testing should be considered, let's say.
Yeah, so that's actually something which I find absolutely fascinating. I mean, I studied human aspects of security, and we've done some work on how standards influence people's security behavior, and our results show the more specific, the more concrete the standardization is, the easier it is to follow. And if it's too abstract, it doesn't really help much. What's your view on that? What's your experience? Do these high-level standards really have an impact?
Yeah, I think so. The standards that we have they are upcoming now basically, and they will be let's say mandatory. Yes, starting now until let's say the next years to come will force people to follow this standard. And I see a lot of activities around security in the automotive domain, which is around this standard. So it's really, for example, a cybersecurity management system where most of the OEMs did not have before. They're now thinking of setting this up and really looking from an, let's say, looking into the whole system, how they create software and how the security plays part of it, and how they can manage security even after they sell their cars. So it's really a lot of activities I see, and so from my point of view, it's already good to have this standard because it puts kind of a focus, a flashlight on security, which is important. On the other hand, we will have type approvals, that's what they call it. Like you need to have an approval from a third party on your car, on your functions and so forth. And I think there, of course, these approvals will then also go a little bit more into the details on what you really do. And I think that's a thing that can be easily done, and it's known for many other standards that, let's say, once you have a third party that inspects you, there normally the technical experts come to you and audit you, and then you can have a discussion on what kind of security testing, for example, in this case, you should do, and what is state of the art in this regard.
Okay. So we're almost out of time, but I have one last question coming in, which is actually picking up your quote of Bruce Schneier concerning processes. And the question is, what do you see the current state of DevSecOps being in the automotive industry, and how can it be improved?
What is about DevOps, or what was the question?
DevSecOps.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say you could say that this is not a system, but a culture, let's say, and for cultures to be implemented is harder. Let's say, coming from a V cycle model, let's say software development, going to an agile, going to DevOps, and so forth. So this is let's say something is not that the management says, okay, this is a process you need to follow. This is more, let's say, changing the minds, changing the culture, changing the work style, and so forth. So I think let's say we are starting this, but from my point of view, changing culture is let's say something that needs a whole, let's say, some more years. Let's put it like this.
Yeah, that's maybe something Jasmine can pick up again in the panel discussion.
Yeah.
But for now, thank you so much for your talk. That was really
You're very
fascinating,
welcome.
and for the answers.